I am Aiden. I'm not the type of protagonist who shines right from the start. I arrived at the public university in the Midwest with a dented suitcase, a scholarship just enough to live on, and a list of things I avoid. Crowds, personal questions, and anything with the word future. I still go to class, still smile at the right times, like wearing a mask so fitting that I forget what my real face looks like. Everything started to change in the fall semester of my sophomore year, in the cognitive psychology class. The class was as crowded as an old movie theater. The professor spoke faster than our thoughts, but the person who made that room quiet for me wasn't him. It was Casey, the young teaching assistant with bright eyes, a warm voice, and an awkward stance, as if he was trying to hide a part of his true self. The first time Casey stepped up to the podium, I noticed his hands trembling slightly. He smiled, introduced himself, and said that every question was valuable and his job was to make complex concepts feel reachable. That sentence hit me hard. Maybe because I'd been living too long in a state of don't touch. I sat near the back row, close enough to hear clearly, far enough to disappear. Casey scanned the class, his eyes pausing on me for half a second before moving on. My heart reacted like I'd been caught red-handed. I'd known I was gay for a long time, but growing up in a small town where silence was the default language, it always came with a vague fear. University seemed freer, but my old armor hadn't fully come off yet. In the third week, the first quiz scores were returned. I did worse than I imagined. Casey wrote, "You understand the concepts, you just don't trust your own expression. Come to office hours if you want to talk more." I planned to ignore it, but that afternoon, the autumn wind blew golden leaves across the trees in front of the library, and I suddenly got tired of always apologizing for existing. I went. The teaching assistant's office was at the end of a hallway that smelled like old coffee. Casey looked up with a warm smile. "Aiden, right? Come in." We talked about the answers, about how the brain processes information, and about not writing like you're asking permission to be right. Then the conversation slid into something more personal. I said that in a crowded class, I felt like a shadow on the edge of the frame. Casey said, "Being seen isn't a reward. It's a basic right." We wrapped up with a bullet-pointed sheet and an appointment for the next week. As I was about to leave, Casey added, "You don't have to fix yourself to fit someone else's frame." I turned back, catching his gaze. In that instant, I saw not just the kindness of a TA, but recognition. As if he could see through the water I used to hide my true self. The weeks that followed changed the rhythm of my life. I started coming to class earlier, choosing middle row seats. I spoke up once, my voice shaking, and Casey nodded like it was the bravest thing that day. We talked more during office hours. I learned he was working on his PhD dissertation on memory and trauma, liked indie music while writing, and had also grown up in a town where silence was considered polite. One late evening, we ran into each other at the 24-hour donut shop near campus. A light rain was falling, pattering on the roof like a hurried drumbeat. There was only one small table left, and we shared it. We talked about family, unspoken things, crossroads no one teaches you how to choose. In the middle of the rain, Casey said softly, "Sometimes what we call discipline is just fear presented nicely." I stayed silent, watching the streaks of light on the glass, realizing something in me was cracking, like an eggshell under pressure. I started journaling, started daring to use the word want, and I started fearing in a different way, fearing that I was falling for someone I should only know as a TA. But every time I saw Casey smile at someone in the hallway, that feeling didn't go away. It was gentle yet sharp, like the edge of a paper tucked into a textbook. I didn't know when my life would pivot from a single moment. I only knew that fall, amid the red brick buildings and the smell of dry leaves, Casey's name had become a silent pulse in me. And I didn't know that he, in his own way, was also looking at me like a big question he hadn't dared to write in his life's dissertation. I don't know since when small things carried such weight. The way Casey pushed his glasses up with his index finger when focused. The way he tilted his head to listen to someone, as if every word mattered. The way his gray sweater hugged his lean but steady shoulders on cold mornings. I reminded myself, he's the TA. I'm the student. There are boundaries people draw for good reasons. But my heart was never good at following maps. Office hours gradually got longer. At first, it was academic questions. Then it became stories about poor sleep habits, songs stuck in my head all day, feeling out of sync with friends. Casey never pushed me further than I was ready. Sometimes he just said, "I'm listening." Strangely, that non-judgmental space made me talk more, like a stream finding its way out. One afternoon at the end of October, the school hosted a big football game. The whole campus was dressed in noise, cheers echoing from the stadium. I didn't go. I sat on the library steps, watching maple leaves fall like unread letters. Casey appeared, holding 2 hot cocos, steam rising. He sat down next to me like that was his rightful place. "I guessed you're not a fan of noise either," he said, with a hint of teasing. The warmth from the paper cup spread through my hand. A different warmth, slower, spread to my chest. "Have you ever felt like you're living a life someone else scripted?" I asked, my voice softer than the breeze. Casey was silent for so long I thought he'd dodge it. Then he said, "Yes. And one day I got tired of the supporting role enough to rewrite a few scenes. Not perfect, but mine." I looked at his profile in the afternoon light, thinking that if life was a script, this was the scene where the camera lingered longer than usual, zooming in on the small details that make viewers' hearts flutter. I tried to keep a safe distance with clumsy humor. He did too. We talked about his dissertation as an excuse. But amid academic concepts, there were still offbeat glances, extra pauses. I caught myself writing Casey's name in the margin of my notebook and scribbling it out, as if afraid of being caught by myself. At the beginning of November, I got a call from home. My mom's voice suppressed worry about next semester's tuition. I lied that everything was fine, but my voice trembled. After hanging up, I sat in the dorm room, the pale yellow light seeming to sigh too. I didn't cry. I trained myself to keep everything inside like holding a storming bird in my palm. The next day, Casey noticed right away that I was unusually quiet. After class, he just asked, "Want to take a walk?" We strolled along the gravel path behind the department, where old wooden benches sat under bare oaks, the chilly wind blowing through. I told him about the financial pressure, the feeling of having the future in sight but being blindfolded. I didn't tell everything, but enough for my voice to shake. Casey didn't promise to fix it. He said, "You don't have to carry everything alone." The way he used "have to" tightened my chest. He shared about working extra jobs through college, the strange shame of having to be strong for family. We laughed lightly when we realized our supposedly unique stories were similar, like 2 puzzle pieces fitting by chance. In that moment, something shifted, not with a grand gesture, but with a quiet acknowledgement. I mattered to him in some way, and he to me clearer than ever. At the end of the walk, as we stopped under a flickering streetlight, Casey said slowly, "Aiden, there's something I have to be careful about. I'm the TA in your class." He paused, searching for words. "I care about you, a lot, but I also want everything for you, grades, opportunities, not to be affected by my position." I heard my heart knocking like a small fist on a door. I nodded. "I understand." I was honest too. "I care about you too. So much it scares me." The words came out, trembling and relieving at once. No background music, no dramatic declaration. Just 2 American guys in a corner of campus, breathing out white puffs in the cold, saying things that had been in our hearts too long. We decided on a specific boundary. Keep all academic interactions transparent. No blurring roles. Casey suggested that after this semester, when he was no longer directly grading or leading my class, we'd allow ourselves to name what's forming. I respected that and was partly grateful he was the adult in our emotional room. But reality doesn't follow agreements easily. Emotions aren't good at waiting for semester schedules. I saw him in class, saw how he was careful with every student equally, and still caught the private glances for me in moments no one noticed. They were like small secrets sparkling in ordinary days, making my heart beat faster every time class ended. One early winter evening, the dorm's heating system malfunctioned. I wrapped myself in a blanket, typing an email about a group assignment. My phone lit up. Casey texted, Just a photo of a steaming tea cup by the window with the line, "Hope you have something warm too." I looked at the blanket around me, chuckled, then seriously realized. The warmth I wanted was his presence, close and real. I still hadn't dared to tell my family everything about who I am. Casey knew that. He didn't push. He just said, "You deserve a life without hiding." The word deserve was like the first key fitting the lock, opening doors I'd thought were bolted shut. The semester flowed by, quizzes, presentations, foggy mornings. Amid that whirl, I felt myself gradually becoming someone I could stand up for. And that, largely, was because Casey saw me before I dared to see myself. Winter break approached. The college town draped itself in a thin layer of snow like powdered sugar on donuts. Beautiful, cold, and quick to melt if touched too hard. I glided through finals week like someone half awake, half still dreaming. Casey was busy with grading and research seminars, but somehow, the gaps in his packed schedule always opened just right for me to step in. We continued to hold the boundaries we'd set. In class, he was the serious TA, and I was the student asking questions. Outside class, sometimes we were just two guys walking across the bridge over the half-frozen river, talking about bad movies we still liked. There were many times I wanted to hold his hand in the cold wind, but I just shoved my hands deep into my coat pockets, hoping my fingers would stop shaking. One evening before finals, the library was open all night. I sat on the third floor, amid a sea of glowing laptops. My mind was thick with chapters. A message popped up, "Reached your limit yet?" From Casey. I replied, "My brain is officially oatmeal." 5 minutes later, he was at my table, setting down a pack of homemade cookies. "Fuel for the desperate," he said. We laughed quietly to avoid being shushed. The fluorescent lights turned everything into cold patches, except his eyes. They were still warm, like a small flame in a blizzard. We sat across from each other, not touching, but not needing to. Casey explained a concept I was stuck on, his pen moving across the paper like a road with a destination. I suddenly thought that all my life, I'd been used to looking at others' maps without daring to draw my own. And now, right at this old wooden table, someone was gently placing the pen in my hand. After finals, the class ended. The plastic chairs sat silent like an audience after a long performance. When the last student left, Casey was still standing there, hands in pockets, exhaling a white breath in the cold hall. We looked at each other, feeling like standing on the edge between riverbank and ice. One more half step and everything would change. "The class is officially over," he said, his voice both relieved and cautious. "Yeah," I replied. "So that boundary." We both laughed because neither would finish the sentence. But the unspoken words stood between us, clear as a lamppost in fog. We went for coffee at a small shop 2 blocks from campus. No longer TA and student in the same class. Just Aiden and Casey. In the corner of the cafe, old jazz music seeped through the scent of cinnamon and roasted coffee. Casey twisted the hot mug between his hands. He didn't beat around the bush. "I'm still a TA in the department, but not teaching your class anymore. I want to be honest about how I feel. Not as a mentor, but as a man who likes another man." My heart did a strange move, like missing a stair but landing right. I took a deep breath. "I like you," I said, simple enough to surprise myself. "Not because you helped me in class, but because when I'm with you, I don't have to shrink to fit any box." We sat in a rare, comfortable silence. Laughter from other tables burst and faded like bubbles. Casey smiled, his eyes softening. "We might mess up. We might be awkward. But I want to try, slowly, carefully, and respecting what we're building." I nodded. "Slowly?" I repeated, but in my chest was a wave that wasn't slow at all. The days after weren't a perfect romantic movie. There were still emails, schedules, reports. But amid it all were small details that changed life's color. Messages like, "Text me when you're back at the dorm." The scarf Casey added around my neck when the wind cut skin. His hand on my back for a brief moment when ice on the sidewalk made me slip. I told him about not coming out to my family yet. Casey didn't try to fix it. He just asked, "What do you need to feel safe?" I thought long, then answered, To know that no matter how they react, I'll be okay. That I'm not alone. He squeezed my hand under the table. You're not alone. One January evening, we sat in the small living room of the apartment Casey shared with 2 other grad students who were away. Snow fell outside the window like white whispers, creating a curtain shutting out the world. Casey played instrumental music, the golden light coating the room like honey. We talked about everything unrelated to school. The first book that made us cry, the first movie that made us feel seen without changing names or hiding. I realized I no longer spoke with a pleading voice. I talked about my dream of becoming a counselor, wanting to help kids who grew up in silence like I did. Casey didn't say great just to say it. He asked specifics, prompted openly, and most importantly, he believed. That feeling of being believed was stronger than any over-the-top praise, like an electric current through my body. When the music ended, the room fell into a meaningful quiet. I turned to him. No more layers of roles or barriers, just 2 people sitting very close. Casey, I called his name like testing if it was real on my lips. He answered with just his eyes. The moment we leaned toward each other, the world didn't vanish. It just stepped back, making room for heartbeats clearer than any theory we'd learned. The first kiss wasn't perfect. A bit shaky, tasting of mint tea, and full of relief so deep it almost hurt. But it was real, and that was all we needed. I understood. My life had turned a different path quietly. Not from a shocking event, but from the gentle patience of someone who saw me and didn't turn away. Spring came without asking permission. Snow melted into small puddles like question marks on the sidewalk, and the college town gradually donned a young green coat. I entered the new semester feeling like I was learning to use a new body. Lighter, less defensive, but also more sensitive to every bump. Casey and I no longer shared a class. That made things both easier and harder in ways I hadn't anticipated. We dated in ordinary ways. Breakfast at early opening diners with country music too loud. Weekend farmers markets where ripe fruit smells mixed with laughter. Sitting on the steps of an old building watching people pass. Some days we didn't philosophize deeply, just complained about endless emails and ridiculous coffee prices. That very ordinariness made me realize what was between us wasn't a passing storm, but a changing climate, sustainable and warm. But life rarely gives anyone a straight, pretty path. Rumors in the department spread faster than spring winds. One afternoon, a classmate asked half-jokingly, "Hey, you're pretty close with T.A. Casey, huh?" The way he dragged out "close" froze me for half a second. Not out of shame, but from the familiar fear rising. Fear of being seen through the wrong lens, judged before being understood. That evening, Casey asked me to walk around the small lake behind the dorms. The wind was still cold, but the water had thawed. He said straight, "Someone anonymously emailed the department, asking about my professional boundaries." He didn't accuse anyone. He didn't blame. But I heard the thin layer of fatigue like mist in his voice. I was honest that we only started dating after the class ended. But being scrutinized still isn't easy. I felt my heart tighten, and at the same time, something I rarely had rose. Anger not at Casey, but at the idea that our feelings had to be under a microscope just because they didn't fit someone's expectations. I gripped his hand tightly. "If you need me to keep distance for a while," I started, though each word scraped my chest. Casey shook his head immediately. "I don't want to turn you into a problem to manage. I just want us to do everything right so nothing overshadows what's really there." He looked at me, his eyes both firm and fragile. "We're not wrong, but we have to be careful." The following days were like walking a thin wire between 2 buildings. Wind could push, but each step was mine. We limited public affection around the department. We talked about the future with more ifs than whens. I discovered a new ability in myself. To love without hiding, but also to love without challenging the whole world every day. In the midst of that, I started interning at the Student Counseling Center. The first time sitting in the small room with green upholstered chairs, listening to a freshman talk about feeling invisible in crowds, I realized the circle had closed beautifully. The things I said to him, "You deserve to be heard. Your feelings have space in this room," were things Casey had said to me, now flowing from my voice without effort. One late evening after a shift, I went to Casey's apartment. The kitchen light cast gold on the walls. He was chopping onions, wincing from the sting but pretending not to. The scene was so ordinary it made my eyes sting more than the onions. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting the knife down immediately. I told him about the session, about the freshmen, about feeling both small and powerful when someone trusted my words. I paused, then said what I'd thought for weeks but hadn't dared say aloud. "You've changed my life, Casey. Not with fireworks. By standing there every day, not running when I wasn't whole yet." My voice shook, but didn't break. Casey didn't respond with grand words. He just said, "You changed your own life." I just turned on the light. Then he touched his forehead to mine. A gesture not performative, just peaceful and close. I realized love isn't always fire. Often it's a steady heat melting ice where no one sees. We still stumbled. Some days I withdrew for no clear reason. Some days Casey was overloaded with his dissertation. Eyes dark-circled, sparse with words enough to worry me. Our first real fight came from something small. I forgot to text him I'd gotten back to the dorm safely after a snowstorm. He snapped out of worry. I defended out of feeling controlled. We were silent for 2 days, an uncomfortable record, like a vacuum sucking out the air. On the third day, I knocked on his door with a bag of oranges and a straightforward apology. He apologized too. We both laughed when we realized we weren't afraid of conflict as much as losing each other. And daring to fight, then daring to mend, made me trust the durability of what we were building like a structure tested by fire. Spring advanced another step, and so did I. I started practicing truth with the closest people in my life. First, my new roommate, who just laughed and asked, "Do you want a sad or happy love playlist?" Then a close friend from high school. She paused, then said, "I'm glad you're finally on your own side." Those reactions weren't magical, not cinematic, but each was a paving stone leading me out of the shadows. The night before my birthday, Casey took me to the small observatory on the hill overlooking campus. The city stretched below like a sparkling map. Wind messed up his hair. I wanted to smooth it but just smiled, leaving it. "Make a wish," he said. I closed my eyes, not asking for unrealistic things. I just wished to continue being brave enough to live my life, and gentle enough with the person walking it with me, even when the road was rough. When I opened my eyes, I saw Casey looking at me with the gaze I'd once misnamed ordinary kindness. Now I knew its real name, choice. He chose to stay, and so did I. As the new semester ran its course, when everything seemed settled, life knocked in its own way. One afternoon after internship, I got a call from Dad. He rarely called just to chat, so my heart instinctively clenched. It wasn't an emergency, but heavy enough. His job hours were cut. The home budget would tighten. He spoke in a forced, cheerful voice, asking, "Still okay, kid?" As if strength was part of our father-son deal. After that call, I sat long in the empty hallway, where late afternoon sun sliced thin on the tile floor. I saw the boy inside me again, the one who always shrank emotions to not bother others. I didn't cry, but it felt like water rising slowly behind an old dam. That evening Casey came looking for me, unannounced, just because of a restless hunch. I told him everything, about my parents, the guilt of being in college while home struggled, the fear that my dreams were a luxury. Casey didn't try to extinguish those feelings. He just placed a hand on my back, voice deep and steady. "You're not an expense. You're the future, and your future has its own value." That sentence didn't solve the money math, but it untied another knot. For the first time, I didn't see myself as a burden for daring to want something for me. One early April day, Casey announced he'd made the final round for a prestigious postdoc, on the other side of the country. I smiled, hugged him like joy had shape and I could keep it from falling. But joy always has a shadow. Back at the dorm, I looked at the US map on the wall and realized distance wasn't just miles. It was missed dinners, time zone shifts, patience relearned from scratch. We sat on the department building steps, listening to the old clock chime into the late afternoon. "If I get it," Casey said, "it's a big opportunity. But I don't want to decide like my life is separate from yours. I opened my mouth, then closed it. No perfect answer, just truth. I wanted him to pursue his path and I feared losing him. Both were true. In the end, we agreed. No promises beyond reach, but no underestimating our own abilities. If he got it, we'd try long distance with a clear plan, not blind optimism but work. Regular visits, online couples therapy if needed, honesty when cracks started. I surprised myself. Turns out growing up sometimes isn't hardening, but daring to voice fears without letting them steer. Amid big things, life sent small moments as counterweights. We drove to the lake on a rare sunny weekend. Wind salty, sand in shoes, waves quieting worries. Casey told about the first time he realized he was different from other boys. Not a tragedy, but a lingering glance at a bandmate. I told about my first admission to myself, in the steamy bathroom silence, that gay wasn't a sentence. When done, we stood side by side watching the vast ocean, realizing we were both still here, whole and stronger than ever. Another turn came at the seniors' graduation ceremony. We sat on wooden bleachers, watching gowns flutter lightly. I caught images of families hugging, embraces big enough to hold someone from drifting into the wide world. I thought of my parents. The thought its time appeared quietly, but clear as bold print. That night, in the familiar dorm room, I called Mom.
I spuka slowly, no script.
I talked about Casey as a real person. How he laughed, how he made the world less heavy. The other end was silent long. I heard the fridge hum in the home kitchen, heard my own heartbeat. Then Mom exhaled hard. She didn't say perfect warm words right away. She said the real. She needed time. She worried for me. But she also said, "You're my son." That sentence, simple enough to seem ordinary, opened a door in my chest, letting light flood in. After the call, I leaned my head on Casey's shoulder. I didn't know if the future would be smooth or bumpy, but I knew I'd stopped hiding from my own name. And strangely, that made the world expand, not shrink. In May, the last cherry blossoms fell on the grass like thin rain. Casey got the official email. He was accepted for the postdoc. We hugged in the cramped living room, laughing and almost crying. "We'll have to be brave," he said, forehead to mine. I replied, "We've already started." That night, we spread a map on the table, not like two people about to separate, but like two plotting a course. Transfer points, holidays, small cares. Send daily photos, even mundane ones. Speak truth when tired. Don't let silence become a wall. I realized love isn't a one-time test. It's a long-term course with homework and patience. In the desk lamp light, I looked at Casey's face. Tired, happy, and very real. I thought, if someone asked, how did the TA change my life? I wouldn't talk about concepts he taught. I'd say, he showed me how to step toward the light even with shaking hands. And the rest, I could walk myself. From that fall, my life changed quietly, like leaves falling and wind growing colder. No one pointing to a specific day and saying, that's the moment. But with Casey, I could pinpoint it. The afternoon in the cramped TA office, old coffee smell, sunlight slanting through the window, and him looking straight at me saying, "Aiden, you don't have to live a life someone else scripted." It sounds simple, yet it was like someone pulling the stuck bolt in me. And from there, everything began. Not a perfect ending, but a real journey, with unexpected turns and deep joys.